Anyone afraid of heights? Well, here's a movie for you. This is 2022's Fall. Warning, spoilers ahead. We open up to Becky and Dan as they scale a cliff, and Dan checks in with her. I'm not even afraid of heights, but I'm not about this life. This is an adrenaline rush. This is the last thing some people do. Becky starts wavering, but Dan reminds her that she's done crazier stunts. After doing a crazy jump, the two of them kiss, and Hunter calls down to them to hurry up. No, I'm taking my time. I'm in no hurry to die. Eventually, Dan falls after a bat scares him, but the line catches him at the last minute. Hunter starts to climb down for help, but Dan needs Becky to unclip so he can have more slack. After she does that, he tries to swing to the cliff, but the anchor releases before he can get a hold. Dan falls to his death, and Becky calls out to him. Almost a year later, a man calls Becky's house, but she doesn't answer. He tells her that he's tried everything to console her, but it's up to her now. Meanwhile, Becky is at the bar drinking herself into even more of a depression, and she calls Dan's cell phone just to hear his voice again. This is absolutely depressing. I thought we were going to be spending the whole movie on a tower. When Becky leaves the bar, she finds her dad waiting for her by the car, and he admits that he doesn't know what to do for her. He tells her that he just wants her to move on with her life, but Becky can't look past all of the good memories she had with Dan. She goes to drive away, but he's not going to let her drive drunk. He puts his foot down and he tells her that she has to get it together. Then he tells her to think about it if the roles were reversed. Finally, she tells him to just leave her alone, and she walks off down the street. When she gets home, she tries to call Dan's phone again, but it's suddenly disconnected. This sends her into the ultimate depression, and she goes to take a bunch of pills. Suddenly, Hunter calls her, and she has her come over the next day. When Hunter gets there, she tells her just how bad she looks, and they head to the bedroom to talk about good memories. Hunter decides to tell Becky that she needs her to be her partner in crime, and she thinks that the best way to get her out of her funk is to have her climb again. It's the tower. I never realized that the tower on the cover of the movie was actually supposed to be a therapy climb. Becky says she doesn't want to do it, but Hunter throws out words of wisdom that Dan said when he was alive. Becky sleeps on the idea, and in the morning, she goes to make her coffee when she looks at Dan's remains that are still sitting on the counter. After thinking about it, she goes to Hunter in the bathroom, and she tells her that she'll join her. They immediately jump into the car, and Hunter takes them to a diner just a short drive away from the tower. As they sit to eat, Hunter shows Becky her channel, and it's clear that this kind of stuff is what pays her bills. Suddenly, Becky's phone starts to die, and Hunter asks the waitress for directions to the tower. She points out to the light far out in the distance, and we get an idea of how tall it is. No thank you, that's the red light of death. That night, Becky has a dream that she's in Dan's arms, but that dream turns out to be a nightmare pretty quickly. She wakes up in the hotel, and Hunter is already out in the car beeping at her. Once they get in the car, Hunter starts recording for her channel, and she almost gets them run over by a trucker. They head to the tower, but they have to walk the last 2 miles. On the walk, they find vultures eating an animal, but when Becky realizes that the animal is still alive, she shoos the birds. Hunter makes a joke of it for her channel, but Becky feels bad for the poor animal. Finally, they get to the tower. It's not too late to bail. You can't even see the top of the tower. It literally looks like it's in the stratosphere. Hunter takes a moment to hype her followers, but Becky starts feeling like she can't do it. She starts shaking and tries to tell Hunter that she can't do this, but Hunter obviously finds a way to motivate her. I wish Hunter would stop using Dan as a reasoning for Becky to climb this tower. Dan is literally a reason never to leave the ground again. The two of them clip to each other and they look straight up the belly of the tower. Hunter starts to climb and the ladder already looks extremely unstable. Becky takes one last breath before going up and she starts her climb. The ladder's shaking non-stop and even the support anchors are rusted like a sunken pirate ship. No one in their right mind would climb this thing. Eventually, Becky grabs a rung that breaks off, and that would have been the absolute hell no for me. After climbing quite a bit, Becky asks to stop for a drink, and Hunter tells her that they're halfway up. Hunter gives her some fun facts about how high up they are, and Becky would really appreciate it if she would never tell her more facts. They continue their climb, but eventually they reach the point where they have to start climbing on the outside. Becky has second thoughts once she reaches this point, but Hunter convinces her yet again to keep going. Hunter could talk a vampire into walking into sunlight. She has that potential to be a good friend if she stopped trying to do stupid stuff with an already extremely traumatized best friend. They start climbing on the outside and Becky makes the mistake of looking down. On top of that, Hunter gets to the point where they have to climb around some radar dishes that are in the way. Hunter barely squeezes through, and it's not much easier for Becky. Once they're through, Hunter tells her that it's smooth sailing from here on, and she jokes around about the ladder being unstable. She finally stops shaking the ladder, but it's too late. A screw knocks loose while she's doing it, but they don't notice it. Eventually, Hunter gets to the top, and she goes to help Becky climb the last few steps. Once again, another screw shakes loose, and they have no idea how screwed they really are. Also, who would stand on top of that without holding the pole? One strong wind blows and they're gone. Hunter gives Becky control of the drone to get some good content, and she even hangs off the edge with one hand. After all that insane stunt pulling, Hunter tells Becky that it's her turn to hang. Hunter's why they teach you about peer pressure in school. Say no to peer pressure, kids. Becky agrees to it and Hunter holds her hand. Just as she's about to lose her grip, Hunter pulls her back up. Becky goes into her bag and she grabs Dan's ashes out of a box. After saying a few words, she lets his ashes go with the wind, and Hunter starts to cry too. Eventually, they decide that it's time to go, and they get their harnesses set. Becky starts going down first, but the more weight she puts on the ladder, the more unstable it gets. Eventually, the ladder pulls away, and Becky starts to fall. Luckily, Hunter is tied off, and she grabs onto the pole just in time. Hunter manages to pull Becky to what's left of the ladder, and they laugh about it for a moment when she gets to the top. When they look back over the edge, they realize just how much of the ladder fell, and they see Becky's bag on the radar dishes. They check their phones, but they realize they're too high to get a signal. They find an emergency box attached to the pole, and inside is a pair of binoculars and a flare gun. How old is that flare gun? Plus, they only have one shot left. What if no one's looking in their direction or in the sky when they shoot it? To top it off, Becky has a big gash on her leg. Great, tetanus. Well, Becky has to pee, and Hunter holds onto her as she relieves herself. Then they simply sit there and wonder if someone heard the ladder fall to the ground. Later, Becky starts recording Hunter, and she asks her why she's doing her channel. Hunter admits that it was actually because of Dan and his death, and Becky tells her that her confession was amazing. As the day goes on, Hunter looks out over the plain, and she notices an RV. Hunter remembers that she had service a little further down, and she's not sure whether it's way down at the bottom or just up here. They tie off Hunter's phone to a rope with a message sending to her followers for help, and they lower it as far as the rope will let them. When they don't hear a notification, Hunter decides to get lower on what's left of the ladder. Well, it wasn't a bad idea, but they're 2,000 feet up. The chances that they would get a signal 50 feet down was pretty slim. So naturally, they put Hunter's phone in her shoe, pat it with her push-up bra, and chuck it off the side. Fantastic. Then Becky notices a tattoo on Hunter's foot that has Dan's secret "I love you" for Becky. They're interrupted when they notice a man and his dog, but nothing they can do gets his attention. They notice that he's part of the RV group, and they decide to shoot the flare towards them when the sun goes down. After sunset, Becky goes over old clips on her phone, and she notices Hunter making faces at Dan. Finally, it's time to shoot the flare, and they manage to get the attention of the men in the RV. The men don't come to their rescue though. They actually steal their car instead. After realizing that there's no help coming, the girls decide to rest, and Hunter almost falls over the edge until Becky grabs her. No one should be falling asleep up there unless they tie themselves to the pole. Of course, this is a good time for Becky to confront Hunter about her relationship with Dan. They're about to die and she wants to know how long she was sleeping with Dan. 4 months, by the way. Hunter apologizes for falling in love with Dan, but that's all they have to say about that. Morning comes and the girls are still sitting there talking about their love for Dan. Hunter swears that she never meant to fall for Dan, and he made her feel like she was being listened to. Hunter can't stop apologizing, but nothing is making Becky feel better. The day goes on and the girls just sit there. Eventually, Becky takes off her wedding ring and she puts it on her necklace instead. Suddenly, her alarm goes off and she tells Hunter that it's been 24 hours since they dropped the phone yesterday. Hunter hates that their water is just out of reach in Becky's bag, and Becky mentions that the drone is in there too. Hunter says that she'll go down on the rope to try and reach it, and she says that they don't have many more options. That's literally the first thing that she said that I absolutely agree with. At least it's Hunter going down instead of Becky. Hunter almost falls immediately, but she grabs onto the rope just in time. She lowers herself to the bottom of the rope, but she's still just out of reach of the bag. Hunter decides to unlatch herself to get a little extra length, but now she's literally holding on for her life. She swings and lets go. Luckily, she lands on the dish and she grabs the bag. After getting a quick drink of water, Becky asks her how she's going to get back on the rope, and Hunter starts working her way around the pole. She decides to hook her selfie pole onto the rope, and she's going to jump onto the backpack. After a whole lot of mental preparation, Hunter leaps and she barely grabs on. Becky starts pulling her up. These girls are going to be absolutely ripped after pulling each other up each time. And of course, she falls. Luckily, she managed to fall onto the backpack. So now Becky has to pull her up all by herself. Also, Hunter's hands are done thanks to grabbing onto the rope. Their chances of survival are looking smaller than ever. Eventually, Becky manages to pull Hunter and the bag up, and she gets her drink of water. Then, they write a note on the receipt from the diner, and they send the drone out towards the motel. This thing has got to have the best range I've ever seen on a drone, but that epic range is no match for a dying battery. They get the drone to come back just in time for them to grab it before it dies, but they don't have any way to charge it at all. They turn it off with hopes of it restoring a little juice, and they rest the rest of the day. That night, Becky wakes up alone on the tower, and she uses her phone's flashlight to search for her. Then she gets attacked by vultures, and she does her best to bat them away. When she goes back to searching, she hears the vulture eating something next to her, and she finds Hunter there with a vulture. She wakes up from her nightmare to find Hunter sitting next to her. In the morning, Becky comes up with an idea for charging the drone, and they get ready to climb to the light bulb at the top. This whole movie should come with a do not try this at home warning. Becky puts on the backpack and she goes to climb the last 30 feet of the tower. It's harder than ever with her rust-cut leg, but she manages to get to the tip top. She takes off her shirt to use as a barrier between herself and the bulb, but the electrical plug isn't long enough. So she uses her wedding ring as a conductor and it works like a charm. Hunter tells her that they need to charge it all the way to make sure they've got a shot at reaching the motel, and Becky stays up there for hours. After hours, the charge is only halfway, but the heat and strenuous task is making things harder. Suddenly, vultures start attacking her, and she holds on for dear life. Finally, the drone charges and Becky comes down to Hunter. She asks her why she didn't catch the bag, but Hunter doesn't answer. No, I need an answer. All she had to do was put her hand out, and she would have caught it. There's no more water now. The girls wait until 10 a.m. to make sure they got the drone to the motel at checkout time, but Becky is having a hard time. She tells Hunter memories of her dad, and eventually it's time to try the drone again. Becky flies it all the way into town, but it gets hit by a semi. The trucker gets out to assess the damage, but he never goes over to the drone. With no more ideas, the girls sit and watch a storm roll by in the distance. Becky tells Hunter that she can't survive another night, and she starts hallucinating. Or actually, she remembers that Hunter already fell to her death when she fell off the rope. This Hunter has been in her mind this whole time. Wow, as she said it, it made perfect sense. But I still didn't think that they were going to do that. Soon the storm hits the tower, and Becky watches footage of herself and her dad. She records a message for her dad too, and she tells him that even though she found her fight again, she's not going to make it this time. She says I love you, and the recording cuts out. In the morning, Becky is barely hanging on for life, and a vulture lands to take advantage of the situation. He starts eating her leg, and Becky snatches the bird. After a fight, Becky ends up winning, and she eats her fill. A newly reinvigorated Becky decides to climb down to Hunter's body, and she says some final words to Hunter. She takes Hunter's other shoe and she stuffs it inside better than they did the first time. Actually, she pads it really well, inside Hunter's body. Desperate times call for desperate measures, I guess. She sends a message to her dad though, so we know that he'll get there as soon as possible. Sure enough, the message gets through. The emergency services arrive, and her dad isn't far behind her. When he arrives, they see them putting a body in a body bag, but Becky calls from the ambulance. They hold each other tight and she apologizes for pushing him away so long. He takes her home, and the credits roll. If this movie taught me anything, it's to not go climbing where people weren't meant to be climbing. As for the movie, it was pretty good. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.